It's time for the Sportsnaut interview. Newsmakers and record breakers from around the world of sports join us in conversation. The latest in sports talk from the editors at Sportsnaut.com. And now, the Sportsnaut interview.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sportsnaut interview. I am Evan Groat, and we're going to continue to focus our attention this week on the NFL, of course, as we gear up for week number 8 of the season. And one of the more interesting divisions in football right now is the NFC West. They have 3 teams who are 5-2. It's going to make for a very interesting second half of the season. We're going to focus specifically, though, on the LA Rams. And joining us is our guest, Dyrud, who covers the Rams over at LAFB Network. And Ryan, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes here. And before we get into it, I want to give you a few minutes just to explain to us a little bit more about the LAFB Network and what we can find over there.
Yeah, Evan, great to see you, man. It's been a while, but good to reconnect with you and keep up the great work. But yeah, happy to be on with you. But yeah, LAFB, we cover all Los Angeles sports. So as you mentioned, I specifically help cover the Rams. We do a Rams podcast over at Rams LAFB on YouTube or just LAFBnetwork.com. But all the gamuts. We're busy right now with the Dodgers in the World Series. We got the Lakers tipping off on Tuesday. The Kings are back on the ice. College football in full swing. So full gamut over at LAFB. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, you had to bring up the Dodgers. I am a disgruntled Yankee fan over here, still upset about last season. And I can tell you one thing, I'm definitely not pulling for the Dodgers to win this year. As much as I don't want to cheer for the Blue Jays, I really don't want to see the Dodgers win it again. So
yeah, understandable.
Yeah. Anyhow, let's jump into it. I was on your X page today, and I saw that you retweeted something, the latest odds actually for the NFL MVP. And for those of you who have not followed, Patrick Mahomes has now leapfrogged Josh Allen as the number 1 odds to win the award right now. And Matthew Stafford, they have him all the way down at number 5. Now, if you look closely at some of the numbers, and if you actually watch some of the games, you'll see that Stafford's numbers in a couple of those key areas are actually better than Mahomes. He's has more touchdown passes. He's got a better passer rating, and his team at 5-2 has a better record. So if you could please make some sense of that and explain to us why you think Matthew Stafford's not getting enough love right now in the MVP voting.
Yeah, Evan, it's a great question. And I have no idea. I can't make sense of it. He's third. Matthew Stafford is third in overall passing yards in the NFL. He's first in touchdowns with 17 and only has the 2 interceptions. So he's playing arguably one of his best seasons that we've seen to date. And that was even with last week losing Puka Nacua, his leading receiver. And then obviously Davante Adams became the lead man and had 3 touchdown performance across the pond in London. So I don't know what it is, MVP, and these are odds right now, right? These aren't the actual finite realistic, but the odds do have a lot of a weight, I think, in how these things really play out. And, there's obviously always love for Allen and Mahomes. Yeah. But I don't know why, for whatever reason, Stafford, even through his career, I mean, you look at the accolades through his career, he's only been to the Pro Bowl 1 time. Mm-hmm. Never an all-pro. He's always not that accolade-like guy, even though statistically he's always one of the best out there. And like I said, this year at 37, having one of his best seasons. So if he continues what he's doing, I'm sure he'll climb that ladder. But it is, for all of us out here in LA, it's definitely mind-boggling why he is 5th on that list. It's crazy.
Yeah. You brought up Mahomes and Allen. Of course, they get more of the love, I think, from the national media. Of course, they're always on national TV. We see a little bit more about them. I think Stafford kind of just flies under the radar, although he's been in the league for 17 years and he's been doing this at a high level for so long. I agree with you. I think he should be getting a little bit more love. Now, you talked about Puka Nacua not being in the lineup last week, and we saw Davante Adams step up. What can you tell us about that emerging, bond between the chemistry between Stafford and Adams? I know it was a little slow going there in training camp with the injury to Stafford, but how's it looking right now, and how do you expect that to continue going forward?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there, Evan. We knew there'd be, I don't want to say growing pains, but there would be some time taken for the chemistry just because they weren't able to build that in training camp. And with Stafford basically sitting out the entire preseason in camp with that back, I don't even want to call it injury, but back nuisance, if you will, the way to talk about all the time. So we knew it would be a little bit of a slow grow. The other thing too, and I'm sure you've recognized this, but Matthew Stafford, as good as he is, and this isn't a knock at all, but he has been known to key in on one receiver his whole career. I mean, you can go down the list of the leading receiving output seasons. Matthew Stafford's usually the quarterback. When you look at Calvin Johnson, when you look at Cooper Kupp, he kind of has his guy that he keys in on and doesn't really spread the ball around as much like other quarterbacks. And it works, obviously, so you don't want him to change that. But because of that, there just wasn't as much opportunity for Davante Adams. Now, Sean McVay, as the offensive coordinator and offensive mind, has certainly tried to get Adams involved. He's had a high target share, even in some of those games. But now with Nacua out, it was like going to be guaranteed that he was going to be the featured guy. So long answer for your question. As long as Puka's out, Davante, the connection is going to be great. Once Puka's back, that's when we'll see if it's still going to be a connection and a split share, or if Stafford goes back to really heavily featuring Puka Nacua.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you mentioned the fact that, history has shown us that he tends to lock in on a guy that he's maybe a little bit more comfortable with. But on Sunday, I saw that he completed passes to 10 different receivers. So he was spreading the ball around a bit more in that game. But, we all know how good Nacua and Adams are. But do you think that they really need to develop that third guy? And I know that may sound crazy when you have two studs like Adams and Nacua, but if this offense really wants to take it to the next level, do they need to find that consistent third option? Because right now I believe it's the running back Kyren Williams who is third in targets. Do they need to find somebody else there to step up?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and this is kind of a good underlying thought with this offense as a whole is, you can see the stats that Puka Nacua has put up. You can even now see some of the stats that Adams, and you're like, well, that's working. That's fine. The problem is they're one of the worst red zone teams in football. So yeah, they can key on those guys to get down the field. Once they get to the red zone, the defense can ultimately shut them down. So they need that third or fourth option. Last week without Puka Nacua, it was their best offensive day of the entire season so far with the offensive production they had against Jacksonville. And as you mentioned, 10 different receivers getting involved. Terrence Ferguson, who was not their first round, but he was their first pick in the second round, tight end. He got his first touchdown as a rookie in the NFL. So the more that they're able to get more guys involved, the better it is for the offense. And they're not having to force feed Nacua or Adams. So yeah, to your point, like if this can become a thing where they find more mouths to feed. Now, specifically at the third receiver, Tutu Atwell was always kind of seen as that when he signed that 1-year extension worth $10 million, making him like the 33rd highest paid receiver, which we talk all the time about the show about how bad that contract looks. But Jordan Whittington is another guy who's now in his second year, 6th round pick last year, who has the type of skill set to truly be that wide receiver 3. He's got the speed, can play in the slot, can play outside, can break away from tackles. So he can really be that third guy. And then aside from that, just getting the tight ends continually involved. They've run a lot more 12 personnel this year. So if Tyler Higbee stays healthy, which has always been kind of an issue the last couple of years, but if he can stay healthy, and if Terrence Ferguson can get more involved in the passing game, then that can alleviate some of that just 1-2 stress, at least in the red zone.
Interesting. So you mentioned the red zone deficiency as part of the problems, I guess, or one of the weaknesses for this offense right now. And the Rams are entering the bye week following the game in London, and a lot of times coaches and the teams like to use this week to do some self-scouting, right? To look at themselves, try to figure out some areas where they need to improve. Now, you mentioned red zone, but is there other areas that you think they really need to, get that worked out as they gear up here for what looks like it could be a challenging second half of the season?
Yeah, defensively, I think secondary has been a unit we've looked at a lot throughout the season. Now, they looked great. The London game was by far, against Jacksonville, their best game of the season, the entire team. So going into the bye, there's not a lot that you can say from that game that they need to work on. But throughout the season, certainly I think the secondary is one. When we saw, Kendrick Bourne, where the Niners have an absolute career day when there was no one else to throw to for them and whatnot. So, they lost their cornerback one and Akila Witherspoon. He should be out another 5 or so weeks with that broken clavicle. So it's been Darius Williams and, a former first round pick that they signed from Washington, who's kind of been their 1-2 punch at corner. And they've played admirably, but that's the position, Evan, I would say, like with the trade deadline approaching. Yes. Are they going to go after a true CB1 on one of those teams that are looking to sell? Or do they feel good enough with this unit that they can get them to the Super Bowl? Because that's the real question. I think the unit is okay, but is it good enough in the playoffs in the Super Bowl? Because that's the aspirations, obviously, of this team. Yeah,
well, that's exactly where I want to go. So you mentioned the secondary as one of those weaknesses, and the trade deadline is approaching first week in November. And Les Snead is a guy who's known to be aggressive. He's not afraid to trade away draft picks when he thinks there's an upgrade out there. So do you get the sense that he is going to make a move? Are you hearing any potential names out there? And do you expect something to happen with this, with especially in the secondary?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, I think they feel good where they are. They've had no indications. Obviously they're not going to tell us, but McVay's said many times, like, we haven't even looked at the market. Like, we're happy we're focused on this group. These guys, coaches speak, what they all say. I think if coming out of the bye, Evan, if they display some more of those struggles, and quickly, I'll just say, I think the only position they would go after in the trade market would be corner or maybe offensive line depth, because they've dealt with some injuries on the offensive line. So really, those are the only two groups they kind of need to address. If either of those units struggle out of the bye, then I think they take a real hard look. They have the 2 first-round picks. They have an extra one in their pocket that they can potentially deal for one of those premier corners. The question is, you have a suitor out there that wants to give up. I think you look at potentially like a Cleveland who's already done a deal. Maybe they want to get rid of Denzel Ward and complete kind of their rebuild, but it's not like Pat Surtain's available in Denver. It's not like some of these top tier guys on good teams are available. So it'll be interesting to see if they find a suitor, but if they show some struggles again coming out of the bye, I would not be surprised to see Les Snead at least on the phone hammering away like he always does.
Yeah, won't be shocked at all to see him making a big time move here to try to improve that roster. I want to come full circle with this conversation. At the top, I mentioned the fact that this NFC West, I find it very interesting with these 3 teams that are 5-2. I mean, the 49ers dealing with all those injuries, they're not showing any signs of slowing down. I think the Seahawks are a fun team to watch, but when you look at, all these teams and you're comparing rosters right now, considering the injuries and where everyone currently stands, who do you think has the most complete roster right now? And ultimately, who do you think will win this division?
Yeah. I mean, on paper for sure. And in some of the games, you got to go with the Rams in terms of just kind of complete roster. But then you see what the Niners did to them on Thursday Night Football in Los Angeles with a tattered group. I mean, that's basically like watching Keanu Reeves and the Replacements, and somehow they were able to get that win. So I do think ultimately the Rams, though, have the best roster. They're situated to go deep down the stretch. I think the Niners, you got to give credit to them, what they're doing right now with these injuries. They lost another edge rusher, right? And Huff just recently as well. So the fact that they're still not just competitive, but they're technically leading the division at 5-2 is really remarkable. But I think as the season wears on, that'll start to catch up with them a little bit. And so the Rams, I think, can overtake them. The Seahawks, I'm looking forward to seeing when the Rams and them meet. I think the Seahawks are like a year away. I love being an LA guy covering USC. I love Sam Darnold. I love seeing that he's kind of back in the form of being a true first-round quarterback. But it feels like the Seahawks are still kind of that year away from being that true contender, whereas the Rams with Matthew Stafford, with Sean McVay, I think will kind of seize control as the season wears on.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the schedule that's remaining? I mean, I know sometimes, that plays a big role in the outcome of these division races. I know when they come back from the bye week, they're going to see San Francisco again pretty soon. But any thoughts on the schedule here in the remaining games in the season?
Yeah, they actually got the vast majority of their tough games kind of out of the way early. And a lot of that came to surprise. Like, you saw they played already the entire AFC South already, played all 4 of them. They swept the division, but looking at it, it was like, okay, well, that's an easy way to start the season. The AFC South, like outside of maybe Houston, there's no one good there. And then you get the surprises of the Colts being arguably the best team in not just the AFC, but football. And then the Jaguars have actually been a pretty remarkable team. Obviously didn't look that good against the Rams in London, but and then they had the Eagles in Philadelphia. So they had a lot of meat up front. They were able to kind of sift through. So it's really going to come down to these division games. They get the Seahawks twice and the Cardinals twice. They've only played 1 divisional game so far, and they're sitting 0-1. So there's some other good games on the slate, but that's what the season's going to mount on, is those remaining 5 division games and how they can come out on that. If they can come out 4-2 total in the division, they'll be looking good, sitting pretty high up in that NFC, I think.
Yes, things are certainly lining up to be an interesting finish there in the NFC West division. But Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. Please go out there and support the LAFB network. Check it out, Ram Skinny podcast as well. And thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us today. Thank you.
Evan, great to see you, brother. Appreciate it. Have a good one.